Let's see who's here. Ariana's here. Talia is having computer problems. Taryn, oh dear. Oh, Reagan. Destiny, Dana is sick. Abby, Veronica, Brenda. Deasia, are you here? Not yet. Elizabeth Lafler seems to be gone. Whitney's here, Elizabeth. Good.
Dr. Madsen?
Yes.
Talia has been having a bunch of laptop problems, especially like since the beginning of the year. So she might show up late today while she's trying to sort it out.
Yeah, she emailed me. Yeah, it's really hard to do this if you don't have a laptop that's reliable.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, she's stressed out about it. But yeah, she texted me just to remind you in case you didn't see the email yet.
Okay. Speaking of laptop problems and just computer problems in general, sometimes when you log into the ULR library, that port for searching for things, that is a beautiful dog, Alyssa. What kind of dog is that?
Oh, thank you. He's a Labradoodle. He was a stray.
Oh, really?
I've had him for about 6 years now. At our old house, he wandered up and he was a hot mess. Nobody had ever taken care of him, and he had no collar, so we got lucky.
Wow. He's just beautiful. He looks a little bit like a Portuguese water dog, which is apparently the kind of dog that the Obamas had because they have allergies. And at some point I had done some research onto what kind of dog would be best for people with allergies. And I came up with a Portuguese water dog, and there was actually some for sale in Arkansas. And I went and looked at them. They were so cute, but my husband didn't want it. He wanted a beagle. Beagles are dog equals beagle in his mind. So we have beagles. We have 16 and a half year old beagles that every morning we kind of wonder if they're going to wake up. So anyway, back to my topic. Sometimes it's hard to get into the library databases. And the whole process of working with library databases uses a lot of pop-ups and what's that other, those objects that are in there. And so sometimes what you just need to do is sort of clean out the cache and the system of your laptop. So if you run into problems logging into the library or getting to things, there are a couple things to do. Clear your history. So you go into your browser, like I use Chrome, and you go into your browser, and one of the options is to clear the history or clear the cache. So that's one way. Another thing to do is just totally shut down, because one of the things that happens is you leave your computer on all the time and all this stuff is up there in the sort of holding area within the computer. And so it just basically is clogged up. So if you turn it off, let it sit for a little while, totally reboot and start over, that often helps. Another thing that helps is shifting browsers. So mostly Chrome seems to work the best with the tools within the library, but sometimes they will suggest that I shift to Firefox, Safari Firefox, or I don't think they usually suggest shifting to the, well, they never say Explorer anymore. And I don't know what their feeling is about Edge, but so all of this is connected. Paul, were you raising your hand?
No, not that I know of.
Oh, well, you have a hand on your screen. Um, if you'll click on participants, um, and you'll see your name, and you can undo
Yeah,
your,
it's not showing my hand raised.
now it's gone. I don't know what it is. Um, and if you, if there's if you keep trying all those different things and you still can't log into the library, then go to the library homepage and click on help and use the chat option, particularly if it's 9 to 5. 9 to 5, they have a person at the chat desk. Since nobody is going into the library anymore, they are usually available at the chat desk, and they will try to help you. Usually they will say, oh, I don't know, and then they'll go ask somebody. Or they'll tell you other people are having the same problem, or they'll make the suggestions that I just made. So I would definitely suggest doing that first. I'm hoping you're getting started working on the on using the library. But that's definitely going to be what you're going to have to be doing this week. So let's remind you where we are on this schedule for this project. So on Tuesday, the brainstorming discussion was due. And today, the topic and plan is due in the Blackboard Dropbox. You can do it as a Google Doc or a Word doc, either one. And I set the deadline for tonight. So you have all day to finish it. Then in 2 weeks, your annotated bibliography is due. So I'm going to talk today about the annotated bibliography. And it also is due through the Blackboard Dropbox. And that Tuesday is the week before the Thanksgiving week. And then the draft of the report will be due after Thanksgiving, and we'll be having individual conferences. So that'll be that week before Thanksgiving will be the end of formal classes. So today, I want to talk about the annotated bibliography. We are working in weeks 10 through 15. And under week 10, I put a whole lot of handouts, additional documents. These are all incorporated in the conversations on weeks 10, 11, and 12. But I thought it might be helpful for you to have them separate. So there is, for example, a handout on APA and annotated bibs, annotated bibliographies. We will take a look at that. There's a sample search in the academic databases. I totally recommend that you print this up and then follow it just step by step, just to get familiar with using the tools. there's a rubric, there's this textbook that we're working on or with. Are there any questions just about where we are in the process? Okay. So I want to talk about two topics today. One is the annotated bibliography, and one is what's called IMROD, which is a way of organizing research papers that will help you in reading the scholarly articles that you find in the academic databases. I need to shift my microphone to the computer. Okay. Okay, week 11 contains material related to the researching within the academic databases. We've seen these two videos, and I pointed out that this University of Victoria Library site has a whole lot of useful videos, and we looked at 3 of them. And this APA references is from the Excelsior Library, Excelsior College online writing lab rather. And we've looked at that before, but that is one of the sources you need to use for using APA or whatever you're using. This is a very short bibliography about annotated bibliography. I'm sorry, a very short video about annotated bibliographies. All an annotated bibliography is a list of references with little paragraphs describing the source.
An annotated bibliography is a list of references where each entry is followed by a brief paragraph that summarizes and critically evaluates the source. Each annotation is generally about 150 words, or 5 to 7 sentences, and it should summarize and analyze the content and evaluate the relevancy, accuracy, and quality of that source. Citations should all be formatted in the same style, such as APA or MLA. The number of annotations depends on the scope of your project. Ask your instructor for details, like what citation style to use. Annotated bibliographies are a great way to kickstart research, since you should get a general overview of each source. For more information on bibliographies and citation styles, check under Research Help and Citation Help in the library website, where there are links to the most popular style guides, as well as subject-specific style guides.
So it is extremely simple thinking about what an annotated bibliography is. There are sample annotated bibliographies in places like Purdue OWL. So because it's just such a common assignment in academics. So I just Googled Purdue OWL and annotated bibliography. And here is one, it's in an MLA annotation. Here's an APA one. So you have a proper APA document and then a paragraph or two that summarizes and assesses the source. Now, one of the things that's hard for students is trying to figure out how to actually understand the research that they're doing, because I'm encouraging you to use academic scholarly articles, and these are written by professors from all over the world who are experts in their field. And sometimes reading these material is very difficult. And yet I'm asking you to summarize it for this annotated bibliography. And so I'm going to talk about something called IMRAD.
So is there a certain amount of sources that
The assignment says for the annotated bibliography, 5, I think, or maybe it's 6.
and do we have to use all of them in our
No, you do not have to use
assignment to like the letter that or whatever we're gonna do?
Right. You do not have to use all of them. And sometimes you find things that aren't useful, but hopefully you will find more than 5, and then you will narrow it down to the 5 most useful, and then be able to actually use them all. Which is a very important point about doing any kind of research. I know everybody is limited on time, but don't just stop with the first things you find. Give yourself enough time to really look around until you find really good things, because that the quality of your ideas are going to be dependent in part on the quality of your ability to support it with research. So there is a structure, you could really call it a genre, that has developed called IMRAD. Well, the acronym is IMRAD. And IMRAD, and it is used for academic journal articles that are empirical. What does empirical mean? It means that the article is based on some kind of collection of data, either through experimentation or systematic observation. The observation could be by interviews, it could be by reading, it could be by describing things. There are lots of ways to observe something, but to do it in some kind of systematic way would become empirical research. And then experiments, which you all know about, I think, that's another example of empirical research. Because there are basically the same kind of things in any kind of article about an empirical research project, there is developed this format to use that makes a lot of sense for people. The format helps people in writing it. It also helps them in reading it. so that if you know the format that many scientific articles use, you're going to be better equipped to actually read it and understand it. So one of the principles about this, about any kind of genre, any kind of workplace writing really, is this idea that sometimes you don't have to read everything all at once or all in order or even everything at all. And so if you recognize how something is structured, you can selectively read as you go through. And there are definitely sections in a scientific research article that you probably won't want to read very deeply, because, if at all, because you're not interested in, like the methodologies that they're doing. Somebody who wants to do similar kind of research might be more interested in following the exact methodology. You're more interested in the conclusions. And so recognizing where you can see the conclusions is what's important here. So the IMRAD formats, it stands for issue method results discussion. And I tend to add A for analysis, but some people just say A is the and in issue method results and discussion. You will find slight variations in these headings and sections, but basically these variations will still come to the same thing. So any scientific article will start with some kind of introductory thing that identifies the issue that's being discussed. And almost always scientific articles are built on previous scientific articles. So, I mean, the idea of scientific inquiry is that you build off of what other people have said. And so almost always what you're going to find is in the issue section is that they have identified sort of a niche that they're going to do. So they're going to have something like in the structure of, everybody has talked about X on this topic, but I'm going to talk about Y. Or everybody has been talking about XYZ on this topic, but they're all wrong. And that's because of Z, Q. And so let me show you this research project that I did to demonstrate this. Or another is an expanding. Everybody has been talking about A, B, and C, and the next thing that we all need to talk about is E. So in establishing the niche, the sort of the point of the issue that they're trying to deal with, they build upon previous research and usually either expand it or refute it or confirm it. I mean, that's another possibility. And so that's what is often in the issue, the introductory section. This is a section that may not always have a heading. It's just the first thing that shows up. And it often includes a review of the literature, which is basically what I was just saying when I said, everybody else has said so-and-so. That is a review of the literature. So when you are doing good science, part of your responsibility is to make sure you understand what everybody else has already said. The second big section is a method. And in that section, they'll describe how they're going about collecting data. And they may have subsections about like their sample and their demographics and a particular technique they're using. It may be very detailed. This is one of those sections that you do not probably have to read. You just need to know, okay, Have they done an experiment? Have they done a survey? What is it? How did they collect data? That's probably all you need to know. You don't have to read all the ins and outs of a methodology. The results section provides the raw data, often in tables, and or numbers or something, depending on the kind of research. And results sections can go on and on and on. And that also is another section that you probably do not have to read much of, because you're not really interested in the concrete stuff, whether they found X or Z. You want to find what they found overall, because you're trying to use this research, and that's what's important. So then the analysis and discussion is where you're probably going to focus your attention, because that's where they explain the data and often summarize it and think about the implications. They often, at the end, will discuss the limitations of the research and the need for future research. That's just kind of standard. That doesn't undermine it at all. It's just kind of good science. So I would recommend that everybody write down IMRD so that you can incorporate that into your memory banks. All right, we're going to look at this article here. This, by the way, is an article about IMRAD. And of course, since they're interested in IMRAD, they actually followed the IMRAD structure. So it's from a new journal called the Journal of the Medical Library Association. JMed Library Association, 2004, July. Medical organizations do not usually use APA, so you're going to see a slightly different format. And this is an article that I was able to obtain through the UALR journals. As it turns out, it's from an open source place, because it's a publication of NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and so they publish this journal, which is a government thing and therefore open source for all of us to do, because our taxes support the National Institutes of Health. Now, the first thing to notice here is that it starts with an abstract. Many journals include an abstract at the very beginning of their article. And an abstract is just a summary. It is not the whole article, it is the summary of the article. And it is often the same thing that you would see in the library database, because the library database is, if the journal has created an abstract, they will just use it. If there is no abstract, they will create their own often, especially if it's more recent, because they've tried to do this. But you will see here that in their abstract, they also have followed IMRAD. So the first thing that you recognize is methods, and background and purpose. They are part of the introduction. So basically, purpose is identifying the issue, and background is sort of the history of the issue, and also, well, it's the history of the issue. So background, and then the next section is methods. In a cross-sectional study, the frequency of articles written under the IMRAD structure was measured. So that's their method. That is, they looked at how often articles were written with the IMRAD structure. Now, this is a summary, so it's kind of abbreviated, and you need to read the whole thing to know exactly what it's saying. The results, it's summarizing the results, and then the conclusions. So we have not the word discussion, but rather the word conclusions, but that's basically the same thing. So then there's this little line, and that's where it starts. And how a particular journal displays the abstract versus the whole article is going to be a little different depending on the journal. But so be aware that often there will be an abstract at the beginning. That's not, I mean, that is definitely helpful for you. But you need to read the actual article itself to understand the details. And then you need to incorporate your reading to get the details. So in the introduction, since its origin in 1665, the scientific paper has been through many changes. Notice that it didn't even start till 1665. Although during the first 2 centuries, its form and style were not standardized, the letter form and the experimental report coexisted. So they used to write scientific reports in letters. The letter was usually single authored, written in a polite style, and addressed several subjects at the same time. The experimental report was purely description, and events were presented in chronological order. So it evolved into a more structured form, and then the letter form disappeared. Method description increasingly developed during the second half of the 19th century. As they became much more, as our society as a whole became much more interested in developing scientific information and in the scientific method. Overall organization known as theory, experiment, discussion appeared. And note that they've got these numbers here. So this is a different kind of documentation. They use references, footnotes, basically. And since it's in online, you can press on this and you can see what the source was, and it actually shows you where you can go get it. In the early 20th century, contemporary norms began to be standardized with a decreasing use of the literary style. And so in the course of the 20th century, the IMRAD structure was adopted. However, and this is an important thing that you often will see in a scientific article, some kind of a however or a so or therefore, that kind of, has set up a background and then said, this is the niche that I'm going to deal with, or they are going to deal with. However, neither the rate at which the use of this format increased, nor the point at which it became the standard for today's medical scientific writing is well established. So they've identified something that is a gap in the knowledge, and then they are going to fill that gap with their research. The main objective of this investigation is to discover when this format was definitively adopted. Also, to have a global idea of the articles published during the study period. Articles written without the IMRAD structure will be briefly described. So this is a historical study, in other words. They want to know, at what point did IMRAD become common? That's what the issue is. And the gap in the research is that nobody else has done that. So here's their methods. In a cross-sectional study, the frequency of articles using the IMRAD structure was measured at 5-year intervals during the 50-year period from 35 to 85. Data collection began at 1960, moving forward and backward from that year until the frequency of IMRAD articles reached 100% and none respectively. Oh, that's an interesting strategy. A sample of 1 in every 10 issues of 4 leading medical journals was systematically selected. So, and then a total of 1,297 original articles were examined. So one of the first things they did is they showed in their method how they were coming up with a very systematic way of collecting the information. Again, it's not that important for you to follow the ins and outs of how they did that. But the point is that they were systematic, and therefore you are more likely to trust this piece of research. They didn't just randomly, find things that proved their point. They came up with a very systematic, neutral way of collecting these things, and then basically counted them. So they looked at 1,297 original articles, and then they examined them from the top rated journals. They have criteria that they identified to have it meet. This here, it was criteria for an original article. So meaning it wasn't just a reprint from somewhere else. Then one of the authors collected the data in a randomly selected substantial 48 articles. The data collection was independently repeated after 6 months. High agreement was found. So one of the things they're interested in their methods and why they go into such detail about it is they're trying to show that it is a replicable research. Again, that it's not just random, and that there is some kind of reliability in the data collection, i.e. different people could collect the same data and find the same results. This is something that you have to do when you don't have a purely quantitative research design. So the results: frequency of articles written using IMRAD structure increased over time. In 1935, there's none. In 1950, it surpassed 10%, and then up to the 70s when it reached over 90%. And then they give the actual chart that shows the data. So how many there were, and this is by different journal publications to see if there's a difference. So just as an aside, this is why I'm suggesting this to you, because the IMRAD structure is so pervasive that you will find it easier to read things if you recognize that that's how many scientific articles are presented when it's empirical data. It's different if it's a different kind of article. And so here's all this discussion of the results, and they're showing the different kinds of results. One interesting finding is that during the initial period of our study, the order of the IMRAD headings did not follow today's convention. Results could be presented before methods or discussion before results. And although a few articles followed the IMRAD structure in the 40s, they were not the same as articles using IMRAD in the 80s. So this was kind of a moving towards the analysis kind of comment. But the real discussion is in the section labeled discussion. And basically they are talking about what they found. And if you were going to use this article, that's really where you would focus your attention on trying to understand what they said. Are there any questions about that?
No.
Ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay. One last thing to look at. To help you is under week 10. There's a handout on APA and annotated bibliographies. So this is just kind of a reminder handout. You definitely should keep this there about how to make an annotated bibliography. And the first page, the front page, it has to do with the citation. And then the
And then-
second has to do
Yes.
with using IMRAD to write an annotation. So again, an annotated bibliography is a list of references in proper form, but instead of calling it references, you call it an annotated bibliography. It follows the format of a list of references or a works cited or a bibliography, whichever type of documentation you're doing. But it has one piece added, and that piece added is a paragraph or two that summarizes the source right after each entry for the source. So a list of references is alphabetical. Your annotated bibliography should be alphabetical. A list of references is double spaced. Your annotated bibliography should be double spaced. The list of references has a certain format for each entry. And if it's APA, you know, it starts with the last name of the author. And then if there's multiple authors, you list the other ones up to 20. And then the first initial of the author, and then the title of the piece, and then where it's published, etc. And so the annotated bibliography follows that exact same format. So once you've done the annotated bibliography, you will already have created your properly formatted APA references. So this is all, you know, preliminary towards your final report, and it'll all be useful to, towards your final report. So here I've reminded you in this of what I just talked about, the IMRAD structure. What is their research question and key findings? And I might add, you know, what was the gap they identified? Methods, what methods did they use to study the question? Results, what were the results? That is the actual data they collected. Analysis and discussion, how do they analyze it? How do they discuss it? As I said, analysis, discussion, sometimes merge together, as in that article. Sometimes they'll be named something else, like there might be a section that's analysis and then a section like implications, but they will all be taking the data and talking about it and thinking about the implications. So the annotation is going to include a summary of the source and then some kind of statement about the relevance to your topic. So how do you plan to use this in your research project? So that's what should be in an annotation in your annotated bibliography. So here is a sample. All right. So here's an article. This is using APA. It's using APA, which means that you have last name, then first initial. APA uses only the first initial and not the whole name. In contrast, MLA and Turabian and in Chicago, they use the full name. And the reason, I think, is because of sort of the values of the disciplines. MLA tends to be, well, MLA is used by humanities disciplines like English and history, which also sometimes uses Chicago or Turabian, which are very similar to MLA. They use the full name of the author, full first name of the author. Why? Because they're humanities-oriented disciplines that are more people-oriented and humanistically oriented, and they're not trying to say they're science and objective. They're trying to say they're humanistic kinds of disciplines. And so first names that give you a lot more information than last names are what they use. They give you an eye of what the gender is. They give you an eye more of, you know, where they come from, etc. The next piece of an APA citation is the date. And always after the name in APA, you have the year, and if it's a more narrowly defined date, you'd have the whole date. And why does APA do that in contrast to MLA? MLA puts the date way at the end, and it is less emphasized. It is not included in the in-text citation. APA puts it straight at the beginning of the entry, and it is part of the in-text citation. That's because APA is more of a scientific discipline, and it wants to emphasize when these pieces of information were developed, because science is, like I said earlier, is a continuous process where new information supplants older information, and the more recent information may be, it's more important to be more aware of what the recent information is. The humanities disciplines are different because they're humanistic, they're interested in human production, human values and literary artifacts and ideas. And those ideas and artifacts and values, because they're newer, does not make them better. I mean, you may prefer them, but just because a novel was written in 2020 does not make it better than a novel that was written in 1806. And so the date of something is not as important in the citation. Then we have the title in the article of the article. APA uses what's called sentence case, which means capital letters only at the beginning of the sentence and after a colon, and if there's some kind of proper noun. Then we have the title of the journal, the publication information, which would be volume and number, and then the pages. And if you have a DOI, which is document object identifier, and is a more permanent citation, you can use that to help your audience get to the spot. Let me stop. Are there questions just about that APA format idea?
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
So here is my summary. Of this article. And what I've done is I've color coded so to the IMRED structure. And I also put a comment there. So the red, the dark red here is to this comment, introduces the research question, dark red text. The article reported on a research study to determine which fast food restaurant college students prefer from among McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's. You should be able to articulate that kind of a sentence, that kind of summary statement without the text in front of you. And I talked about this a little last week. When you're working from other sources, you do not want to be cutting and pasting. What you want to do is read it and then summarize in your own words. And what I'm suggesting is sort of a process to go about reading these articles and summarizing them, to actually use the IMRAD structure to help you write that summary. So if you know that first thing you have to do is write a sentence that identifies what the research topic was, then you know that you write that as the beginning. And so this tells me exactly what the whole research project was about. Which fast food restaurant do college students prefer from among McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's? Not the most exciting research, and pretty, you could also do market research, just counting, but then you could, but this also is trying to understand not only what, but why. And of course, they found a preference for McDonald's. How many of you prefer McDonald's over Wendy's and Burger King?
I don't.
Depends on what I'm getting.
Yeah. Everybody in my family hates McDonald's, but McDonald's is the market leader. McDonald's picks up place where they're going to build, and then all the other ones build around them. McDonald's comes up with new things, and all the other ones start following it. So the first sentence is the introduction. It introduces the topic, the question. The second one, this purple, is describing the method. Student opinions were collected via surveys. Now, there was like 2 pages worth of discussion about the methods, but we don't really care about all the details. You just want to figure out that they collected it during using surveys of students. The green is the results, IMR results. This results showed that for all 3 restaurants, students look for quality and practicality. And not a real surprising result. Although I think it might be interesting to see if quality and practical, which one was more important. And then this blue text is more on the results. The quality dimensions student valued were quality food, cleanliness, quality of service, variety of healthy menu. And the practical dimensions students valued were convenient location, fast service, and low price. The study found that student preferences for McDonald's had dropped since earlier studies because quality was judged as more important than practicality. Well, that's interesting. While McDonald's was still perceived as the most convenient, Wendy's was perceived as having the highest quality. So this purple is still a continuation of the results, or I guess I called it blue earlier. Then red is discussion. The author suggests students will be attracted to high quality food options and not just convenience, and that university planners must consider this in designing food options. So, assuming you're writing a report to ULR, convincing them they need to do something about their food service options, how could you use this? Well, I could use this as evidence for what college students are looking for in food services, including a variety of healthy menu options, which was also part of this. So essentially what it's saying is that quality is what's important, and the particular dimensions of quality were the quality of the food, the cleanliness, the quality of the service, and the variety of a healthy menu. So again, here's a entry from an annotated bibliography. It has a correctly formatted APA entry in double spaced and in hanging indent. And then it has a summary. The summary does not have to be double spaced. It can be single spaced, and it should include a summary of the article and how you're going to use it for your research project. One of the things that people, and I think I've gone through this before, but one of the things that people run into trouble or need to learn how to do with annotated bibliographies and lists of references is doing hanging indent. Hanging indent is this kind of format where it's the reverse of paragraph indent, where in paragraph indenting, you indent the first line. And with hanging indent, you outdent the first line and then have subsequent lines indented. And the reason why you do that is so that a new entry has started with anytime you see an outdent. And it just helps the reader read it better. And in Microsoft Word, it's really easy to do. This is not Microsoft Word, so I'm not going to do it. But what you would do is select, and then you type Control-T or Command-T if it's a MacBook. There's also a particular menu thing that you can do for paragraph format, and that is exactly like with Google Docs. So with Google Docs, you select what you want to change into hanging indent. So I'm going to make it not hanging indent. All right, so it's no longer hanging indent, but I'm going to select it. I go to Format. I go to Align and Indent. And I go all the way to the bottom to Indentation Options. And then Special Indent. And so first line is if you want to set it up so you have that paragraph indenting, and it'll just do it automatically without you having to press tab. And hanging indent. Well, let me just show. So I do first line and I apply it. So it creates it exactly like a hanging indent. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go to Format, Align and Indent, Indentation Options, special indent and hanging. And it will automatically do 0.5. You know, you could change that, but 0.5 is sort of the expected way. You click on apply and it does it that way. You definitely want to be able to do that with your document, because otherwise you get yourself into the habit. If you don't get yourself into that habit, you try doing it manually. And that means that every time you make a change, it gets destroyed. So let's say you realize that there are two more authors in this book. So just pretend. Since I set it up as hanging indent, it just makes it all move along. If I didn't, it would wreck up my format. If I try to do it this way, I click on, I move my cursor to the end of the first line and to go like this, which meant it's a new paragraph right there. And then I go, or even, let's say, then I use that. So this is one format and this is a different format. If I try to add something there, you see, of course, what happens. And, you know, then you're going to waste a whole lot of time playing around with your format. So we're going to leave it back like that. Okay. Are there any questions about the annotated bibliography, well, or the plan that was due today, the annotated bibliography due in a couple weeks?
No.
No.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
So I'm back on the course schedule. And what I really recommend that you do is you take a look at this and come up with a plan for yourself so that you will be done with the annotated bibliography by November 17th. And you have, from this point, a week and a half, so you have plenty of time to do that. And we are going to be continuing to focus on us finding and documenting and summarizing academic research next week. Okay?
Okay.
So that is what I have to say today. I hope everybody's doing okay. And only a few more weeks. We're almost done. You're going to do it. So, and if you just follow this schedule I've given you, it will be done. So I can't quite make it mindless, but I guarantee you have plenty of time to do all these pieces. And so if you do it, it will work. It will be finished in time. Okay. I wish I could make it mindless, but any questions?
No questions.
All righty, I will be reading your plans and giving you feedback. I know that most of them have pretty vague comments about most of it, particularly the research. I will be trying to make suggestions for the research. It is not always easy for people to figure out how scientific research, academic research can be used in these, but there's lots of research out there. People are always studying all these things that you guys are interested in, and so you should learn to use them for evidence. And most of the disciplines that you're from would like you to learn how to use academic databases, which is really one of the reasons why I do that. So like in nursing, they want you to be able to go into the evidence-based practice, which is the empirical things in nursing, and find that. In social work, they want you to be able to do that because there's a lot of research about what helps people. And then well, the others, all the disciplines, each one has sort of a different kind of interest in it, but they all want you to be able to use that kind of research. So I will sign out and I will see you next week. Maybe we'll have a president by then.
Maybe.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good weekend.